Welcome back to Out on That Line. We are on the edge of 17 with track 17 this week. I'm Geoff, here with my co-host Alex. Alex, how you doing this week?
Oh, I'm doing just great, Geoff. Thanks for asking. How about yourself?
I am doing fine. I do have a little mea culpa here. It was brought to my attention that on the last episode with Megan Thee Stallion, I falsely said that the City Girls were from Houston. They are from Miami. So sorry, Valeria. Thank you for listening. Thank you for pointing out my mistakes publicly on Twitter, I might add.
Ooh, no way.
Yeah, we'll address that. But, try to find some mistakes in this one because we're going to be perfect all the way through.
You're goddamn right. It's going to be as accurate as our review of Focus was.
Yes, absolutely. So this week, we're going to be going over the new HAIM album. Thank you, Alex, for correcting me. It is not pronounced HAIM. It is HAIM. I did not know that till just before the episode, but I'm glad to know that now, and I'm going to keep saying HAIM to try to wash the HAIM out of my mouth and not make that mistake during the episode.
Get the HAIM out of there. Get that fucking HAIM out of there.
Yeah, get it out of there.
I think, to be fair, when I brought it up on the show, if I in fact brought it up on the show, I'm pretty sure I was like, yeah, HAIM! I was just like leaning into it as hard as anybody else. Because it's HAIM. I mean, what else are you supposed to get out of that?
Yeah, I mean, mea culpas all over the place here on track 17. But from here on out, nothing but accuracy and perfect information.
Total commitment.
Yes. Before we get to the HAIM album, I think we have both decided there is something that needs to be said about one Taylor Swift, who just released the sister album to one of our least favorites that we've ever reviewed on this show. It's called Evermore. And I think this album cemented the fact that I will not like her music forevermore.
I agree, Geoff. I like to think of it like Evermore. How about Nevermore, as in The Raven, as in Edgar Allan Poe, who wrote The Cask of Amontillado, where a dude gets buried inside of a wall, which is what I'd like to see happen to Taylor Swift so she can stop making music. And that is what we call in the business coming full circle. You're welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, he is under contract with Out on That Line, folks. So if you do need to hire him for other things after that, you do need to go through our legal team.
Yes, the considerable resources of our full legal team.
Yes.
But yeah, no, it's Taylor. Oh, sweetie. I don't love being a guy who hates Taylor Swift, especially in the context of the HAIM album and some of the things I have to say about that album. I don't like being a guy who hates Taylor Swift. I think it's low-hanging fruit. It's strawberries. It grows out of the ground. Like, It's not like I get any joy out of bashing her. If she could pull a Miley Cyrus and come up with something that I was like, well, this is legitimately compelling and different, and she put her heart and soul into this, then like I have to give it props. I'm not so much of an asshole that I'm going to sit there like, well, it's Taylor Swift. You know my policy. Put her in jail. So like, I am rooting for Taylor Swift in a certain way, much like I'm rooting for Billie Eilish, but I enjoy Billie Eilish's music. Taylor Swift has had a lot of time to perfect the craft, and this is where we're at. She's still singing songs about like rolling in the leaves with a corgi puppy in Central Park. Like, what's going on? What is going on, Geoff? Your thoughts?
I will start off by quoting one of the lyrics from the first song on the album. And this will tell you, I think, everything you need to know about Taylor Swift. I never would have known from the look on your face, lost in your current like a priceless wine. Lost in your current like a priceless wine. What is that? Even like you dumped a bottle of wine out into a river? What's the imagery that we're supposed to be getting from that? Just a bottle floating along in a stream? In a gutter on the New York City streets? I don't understand what we're referencing here.
So trash, Geoff? Are we referencing trash?
Yes, and I think in that bottle, I think her lyrics are the message in that bottle, hopefully lost forever. But maybe like 60 years from now, some person's going to come across these and be like, what the hell were they doing in 2020? Because these lyrics are about as bad as it gets. With the in I guess that's not to say, like, you listen to somebody like AC/DC or, any of those kind of bands where it's just like kind of schlocky rock all the time. None of those lyrics are very deep, but they're not trying to be either. These lyrics are really making an effort to be very emotionally expansive, very emotionally deep, and they're just not. When you say something like "lost in your current like a priceless wine," it doesn't mean anything. And that's
At
what
all.
she constantly does on these albums. And I don't understand why people continue to purchase them, support them. It's like at a certain point, I guess they're just so invested in being a Swiftie that they just aren't willing to take a real critical look at what she's doing, because she has done some really good pop music. I mean, she's had plenty of songs that are very catchy, for what they are perfect for the radio, and that takes a certain talent as well. Like, that's not just something that anybody can do. You got plenty of one-hit wonders, but she's had tons that have been very successful on the radio. So clearly there's some level of talent there for writing songs and putting them together. What she has put out with these 2 albums is garbage. It's just bad music. And you could say the music itself is fine, but the lyrics really just ruin any sort of enjoyment that you could possibly have from these.
Yeah, it's just more navel-gazing bullshit. She's just... And again, this is going to come up in my thoughts on HAIM, but I'm going to go ahead and say I understand Taylor Swift has faced adversity in her life, and there are like public things we know about, the whole Scooter Braun thing, turbulent relationship stuff. We're all very aware of that. I'm sure there are personal struggles we're not privy to. I don't mean to be like, oh, Taylor Swift has never had a bad day in her life. However, I think the level of success she achieved early on gave her such a kind of life that it hamstrung her songwriting ability. Mm-hmm. I don't know where everybody who listens falls on No Junk, No Soul. Do you need to suffer to make great art? That's debatable. But you need to have a perspective and a worldview that she wasn't allowed to have as a, 17-year-old who's suddenly a pop star? It's like Britney Spears or any of these people. It's just you get thrown into the fucking Shark Tank from day one, and I think you kind of do lose a certain ability to relate to those of us on the ground. Those of us who are waiting with bated breath for another round of COVID relief checks. Like, you don't know what that's like. And I'm not saying you can't make art because of it, because you still have a perspective. But we don't know what it is because you don't know how to tap into it, because you know what makes money, which is just the like Afghan scarves and cute boys at the Baskin Robbins. You're my favorite flavor. Can't wait to taste you later, boy. Like that kind of shit. It's preventing her from growing. You love Taylor Swift for what she is if you love her, but you won't love her if she changes. But she needs to if she's going to be like truly great as an artist. She's a successful recording artist, but as a musician, if that's what we want to call it, she's a fucking popcorn fart, man. I'm sorry. I don't see it. And with every new output, I see it less and less.
Yeah. And I think because she's, the fact that she has gotten away from doing, the big pop songs, like We're Never Getting Back Together, Shake It Off, like those ones that were just like everywhere all at once that she released, like those as pop songs are good. If that's a talent you have, that's fine. I don't expect a song that I hear on like 102.5 or 101.5 or whatever the real kind of big pop music station is here down in Austin. I don't expect those songs to really move me emotionally ever. I expect them to entertain me. And that's what she used to do. Like, these songs are just not entertaining. They're very melodramatic, and it's hard to believe that somebody with her status in life could really have these situations happen to them in a way that caused her so much hurt that she wanted to write about them. And the fact that I say that, and again, like you said, it's not saying she's not having bad days. It's not saying that she's not suffering in some way or another, but the way that she writes the lyrics just don't lead me to believe it whatsoever.
She didn't get to really be a youngin'. So I feel like she just like looks at someone and goes, I don't know, what's on 16-year-old girls' minds these days? And like relies on that to feed the kind of things she writes about, because it's a sophomoric delivery. And this new stuff, this cottagecore stuff that she did in the pandemic, Folklore and Evermore, it is the fucking soundtrack to an overdose on melatonin. It is just like, and that actually makes it sound kind of pleasant. it's just like
It would probably
forgettable.
help.
It's like someone on the bus who just won't stop talking loudly on speakerphone. It's just there. You can't ignore it. It's not good. You want it to stop. You have no ability to make it stop unless you kill someone. And I'm not going to kill Taylor Swift. We're not there yet, Geoff. Give it time.
No, maybe if there's a purge or something, but it's just, I don't know. It's really difficult. And if you're listening to this and also a big Taylor Swift fan, I don't know if there's a lot of crossover between Out on That Line listeners and big Swifties. If you are one and you'd like to defend Taylor Swift to us, please do. Like, please message us. If you want to like call us, do it. Like, we'll send you our number. Like, if you want to say it in person, please do. Because I just don't understand what people see in the music. I guess it's pleasant enough to just listen to if you have it on in the background. Like, it's fine. Like, it's just nothing. Like you said, it's popcorn fart. Like, it's not offensive. The part of it that's offensive to me is that this is being passed off as some sort of huge emotional epiphany for a lot of people. And I just don't see how. I just don't see why they care this much.
Well, and don't make the mistake of, like, me in particular. I'll only speak for myself. Me, like, really shitting over the level of emotional maturity in Taylor Swift's song and, like, her level of emotional maturity. Please understand, I'm not saying that if you like her music and it means a lot to you and you've cried to her music and it's gotten you through tough times, I'm not saying that makes you emotionally immature. Far from it. I'm trying to give you enough credit to go, you are capable of handling more. You deserve better. And the longer she masquerades as a commodity instead of trying to branch out and do something different, you love her, but I don't know, it doesn't seem like a loving relationship back.
No. And the way I see it is, like, if you really want emotional music, if that's what you're looking for, just go listen to some Mazzy Star. Go listen to that. Like, if you're looking for some really kind of downbeat, really kind of a real emo, shoegazer kind of music, go listen to Mazzy Star. You're going to find
listen to Look On Down from the Bridge.
Yeah, you're going to find a lot more depth in that music than you're going to find here. And if what you're looking for is just something to cry to and something to really connect to mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I just don't think Taylor Swift is connecting to the music on those levels for you to justify her efforts by doing that with her music. And, if there's so many artists out there that are really, truly pouring their heart out into this, I mean, that you just can't even, I don't understand where you can find that emotional depth in Taylor Swift's music and not have found it in other places, because this is about as shallow as a puddle to me.
You know what's really going to suck? Her Kennedy Center Honors show.
Fuck. You're right.
When we're like 65 years old, they're going to just put a bunch of colorful medals on her, and President, I don't know, Madison Chase or Austin D'Amelio, some TikToker who's president of the United States. We honor one of the greatest artists of the previous generation. And even though she's totally old and icky right now, we just want to thank her for all of that music that we use in our videos to get rich and buy Los Angeles.
Yeah, we're just all going to have to watch it in the town square from our districts, because it's going to be like Hunger Games by that point. If Taylor Swift is getting a Kennedy Center Honors, I don't know what kind of world that's going to end up being, but it's not going to be a good one.
It's just you and me there lashed to a wheel being shot full of darts while she performs. It's just her ultimate vengeance.
Yeah, and I feel like she would do that. Like, if she ever heard this podcast, I don't know why she would ever listen. I hope she does. And I hope she retweets it and talks about how much she hates it. Give us those numbers, baby.
Yeah.
Give us those numbers so we can bring in those advertisers. We would eat it up.
Hate and love are so close on the spectrum, Taylor. And you know as well as I do that that's the case. You know what she would do that would be diabolical if she really wanted to destroy this podcast? Make me fall in love with her and then dump me. Because I'll fall for it. I will. I mean, I all these things I've said about her, your boy's still a simp at the end of the day. If she comes walking my way, you better believe it's all over. This podcast is done.
I mean, I don't know if she's got a song about a podcaster that broke her heart yet. So it might be. I don't. As long as you get some sort of writing credit from that, I think it would be absolutely fine.
I love you, baby, like a vitamin D deficient podcaster.
You got me feeling as low as the basement you record in.
I'll think that song's about me. Rory, get in here and tell me if you think that's true.
Yeah, he'd probably think it's about him.
Yeah. He doesn't.
having never met her in his life. Oh, man, I think that's about me.
You know? Oh, shit. We have fun here.
We have a good time here. So I guess in short, just to wrap this all up with a nice little bow, stop giving Taylor Swift the streams. Stop giving her the credit and find something better, please. There's plenty of better music out there. And if you want recommendations from us, we'll be happy to give them. Listen to the rest of our episodes. You've heard plenty of recommendations from us about better albums than what she's produced.
Just like, not to prolong this too much more, but somebody once said, Disney is the first culture you're ever exposed to. It can't be the only one. And especially if you found Taylor Swift at a formative period in your life, like, you don't have to cut her out of your diet wholesale, but just take a journey and find someone else and see what they're putting out there that can kind of scratch that Taylor Swift itch for you. Just like, it's like, I keep making metaphors, but it's like dating someone since high school and you've only ever had sex with each other and you've only ever like been with each other for like 10 years. And that's like a great thing. But there is kind of this idea of, well, what if? What's going on outside of this bubble I've created? So I would urge you all to emerge from the Taylor Swift bubble and just bury yourself in some Megan Thee Stallion or something. I don't know. Find your own thing.
Yeah.
But just take a chance. In 2021, take more chances. Yes.
And you may even take a chance on this album that we're going to talk about today by HAIM. It's called Women in Music Part 3. Now this is not the third in a series of albums called Women in Music. This is just their third album, correct?
Correct.
Yes. And so I think what they did here, and I noticed in one of the little interview things, where they kind of go in the background of the songs, that when you take the first letter in each of those words, WIMP3, it spells out wimpy, which is, I think, their kind of tongue-in-cheek thing that they did with this one. I don't know if that's why they named it Women in Music Part 3. I think they just noticed that it says that. And so that's what they kind of referred to it as.
Interesting. All right. Well, I like that, wimpy, especially because like some of my criticism is kind of anchored in that spirit. I guess off the top, just to kind of not bury the lead, I think it was a totally adequate album. There's some stuff on it I really enjoyed. There was some stuff on it that was actively forgettable. I was neither over nor underwhelmed. I was just whelmed. And I think that's part of the problem from an enjoyment standpoint of this album is like, hey, there is some stuff that kind of moves the needle, but the rest of it's kind of a bread sandwich.
Yeah, and I'll absolutely agree with that, because there was a few, we always do the listens where it's, you listen through, either on speakers in your house or in the car when you're driving, just kind of, a way that you normally would just listen to any other music, just to kind of get a feel for the albums, the emotions they're trying to get across, and then sit down, listen to the lyrics, have them up while you listen to the music on headphones and really kind of get a feel for the layers of the music, the actual really listening to the lyrics, trying to pull out the meanings of what they're trying to say. So you're getting kind of the both levels of entertainment that they're trying to provide. And I would absolutely agree with you that there's some songs where I was like really lyrically, musically just came together and hit for me and were really, really good. And then there was a handful on here that I was just like, well, I didn't hate listening to that, but there was not a whole lot there for me to try to go back to that I think I would enjoy. And I thought, as far as just an overall impression, though, it was a good effort. Like musically, everything was well produced. There was nothing that I was like, oh, they should have done something better here. I think they did put out what they wanted to put out. It just happened to not necessarily land with me 100% all the way through the album.
Yeah. Now, here's where I'll get into another thing. It's kind of difficult to offer any criticism of this album because the sisters, Danielle, Estee, and Alana, in a lot of interviews, and a lot of the material on the album reflects this, but in a lot of interviews, they talk a lot about, well, we did this song and we really like it, but there's probably some dude bro out there who's like, oh, I don't know, that guitar riff isn't that good. And like, that's just how they feel about it. But whatever, we're proud of it. So a lot, and I'm not hammering them for it because it's with the caveat that women in music have a way different experience than a man consuming it or a man in music. So like, I'm not saying like, oh, here they go with their feminist bullshit again. It's not that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it becomes difficult to critique certain things that I want to critique because they themselves chalk so much up to like, well, if you don't like this, like, it's probably not for you. You're probably just some dude, bro. I'm like, I have like legitimate criticisms that I want to give, but like not seem like an asshole, but they've kind of already set me up to look like an asshole. And in me talking about it, I don't do myself any favors, but like, it's not, I guess I'll just preface the whole discussion with, it's not meant to be like, oh, guy mansplains what HAIM'S trying to do or what they could have done better. Since they're so hyper aware of it, I'm hyper aware of it. This has nothing to do with them being women. I mean, listen to anything else we've talked about on the podcast. We're like, when there are kudos to give, there's kudos to give. It's music. It doesn't matter who it's coming out of. Obviously, different experiences and walks of life contribute to your music and affect the way that you make it. But the way that it connects with you is universal. We've talked about the universality of music on this podcast. That's our whole fucking thing. So if it strikes something in you and you have thoughts about it, that's a good thing. And for better or worse, I have thoughts on all of these songs, especially the ones we're going to talk about. So it's not like, well, I would have done it better. It's just, this is what my impression is.
Yeah. And I think what you said, like kind of right when you started the last part of what you were saying is that not everything is for everybody, and I definitely got that sense on this one that, it may not have been something I could connect with, but again, it wasn't something I'm like, oh, this is terrible. I never had, I don't think I ever got any impression of anything I actively didn't like on this album. It was just several things that I was like, well, this probably wasn't written for somebody with my life experience with the things that I've done. Like, so just for me, musically was plenty good enough for me to just be like, okay, well, lyrics weren't for me, but we move on to the next, because there was plenty on this album that I really did like quite a bit. And I know when we went over, we got about 6 songs that we're going to really go in depth with. The first one was one that you introduced that you mentioned was one that you really like. So why don't you start us off with that?
So the first one is Los Angeles, and the girls from HAIM are from Los Angeles. It's where they grew up. It's their hometown. So this song takes on the perspective of this kind of dreamy ode to the place where they grew up, for better or for worse. And in talking about it, I want to say it was Danielle. She's I believe the eldest and kind of the spokeswoman of the group. She was talking about how they grew up in Los Angeles, and while they were growing up there, it wasn't really like a cool destination city, which I'm like, really? I think LA's always kind of been like in everyone's mind. It's been popping, but whatever. You grew up there, so different perspective. But that's where they grew up, and it kind of had this kind of weird reputation in their mind. And then all of a sudden it became very fashionable, very cool, very it. And they started to see the faults in Los Angeles in a different way, like things that they saw as a fault, people suddenly saw as a strength. And to them, things that they loved about Los Angeles, people couldn't stand. So like they have a completely different experience than a lot of people who are going to listen to this song. But again, we talk about the universality of it. It's this conflicted relationship with a place that shaped you. And for better or worse, you love it. That's how I feel about our hometown, Barrie. I'm like, it's not a place I want to be anymore. It's a place that served a purpose. It's a place that helped turn me into who I am. But there's a time for everything, and the time for the hometown is over. Not for everyone, but for me. And like, that's just kind of how it is. And everyone has a different relationship with their hometown. Some people never leave. Some people leave when they're 16 and they never come back. So I really always have kind of a soft spot for people talking about home. And I thought this was a nice way to start the album, and just kind of a interesting tribute to the place where they were made.
Yeah. And I think first of all, I'll say the way that they kind of they called the song Los Angeles. It's about Los Angeles, but they also kind of nailed like a very kind of California dreamy musical vibe to this as well. I felt like the almost had like a doo-wop kind of sound to it, but then you get into the chorus and it has those very dreamy kind of open chords they really love. And as a guitar player, I get pretty nerdy over guitar pedals. They really love the chorus pedal. And for folks that aren't a guitar player, don't understand what that is, the one that kind of makes the guitar sound like it's a little bit underwater. If you're familiar with Prince's Purple Rain, that guitar sound is heavily influenced with a chorus pedal. It's just that kind of chimey, chorusy sound that adds to it. It's very, it can be a very cool thing when used correctly. They use it correctly throughout the whole album. That's one thing I noticed that I was like, wow, they really like their effects, but musically they're very talented as well. And I think they're all multi-instrumentalists. I think Danielle is the main percussionist. But other than that, I think they all kind of swap. Whoever writes the song sings it, plays guitar. I think Danielle generally is the one that handles the drums. Maybe the other ones do a little bit, but I think she's a very talented drummer. She's toured with, Jenny Lewis, who was the singer in Rilo Kiley. So she's got some bona fides, that she did before she was involved with her sisters in the band here. But I will say it was a cool concept, this song, the way that they made it sound like California, and it's about California. And like you said, everybody's got that weird relationship with their hometown that other people aren't going to understand unless they're also from that place. I've always said that Barrie, where we're from, is kind of, a shitty place to a lot of people outside of that. But with that comes sort of a toughness. It's if people are going to talk shit about where you're from, you're going to start taking a little bit of pride about it because they're also in a way talking shit about you. So while they may not love Los Angeles, may not think it's the best city on the planet, they are like, well, this is our home. This is what formed us. So at a certain level, we have to be proud of it. And I thought they really did a good job on this song showing that. And especially in verse 2, they mentioned New York is cold. I tried the winter there once. Nope. Clearly the greatest city in the world. So they're giving credit to New York as the biggest, brightest, best city in the world. I don't know if that's necessarily completely true. But they said the next lines are, but it was not my home. I felt more alone. So they feel home. They feel a connection to Los Angeles. Whether it's a good or bad city, they're not really trying to convince you either way. They're just trying to tell you that this is where we're from. This is what formed us. This is why we are the people that we are. And it really is, I thought, a good, concise, great pop song.
Yeah, and I lived that whole New York verse. It was a place where I went, and I got to tell you the part about like, ooh, the winters, ooh, not for me. If you're from California, if you're from Vermont, it didn't snow once when I lived there. Mm-hmm. It's fucking amazing. It got cold and windy, but like, whatever. You're not slopping around. Like when I lived in Boston and it would snow, the trains were fucked. They'd stop running. You'd sit in a puddle. It was a mess. It was a nightmare. That didn't really happen in New York City. And it is this big, bright, there is no fucking city that I have ever been to. There's no other city fucking like New York City. Mm-hmm. It's wild. And there are things about it I fucking hate. There are things about it I love. There are things I didn't expect to love that I loved. But it wasn't my home. And that's the one thing I kept coming back to. Even when I made peace with like, I'm in New York for the long haul until coronavirus. I'm in New York for the long haul. I'm ready to do this thing. Like I have a weird love-hate relationship with this city, but I'm going to gut it out. It's kind of an interesting moment when you arrive at that, but every time you're like, it's just still not home. So I always appreciate hearing other people's perspective on where they came from.
Yeah, and I thought they did a great job with this one. And I hadn't really ever listened to HAIM before this album. I'd listened to, I'd heard some songs here and there, so I had an idea of, clearly very much like an indie rock band, and I knew that they were sisters. And I never had like a real positive opinion about them, nor a negative opinion. So it wasn't like I really had anything coming into this album that I was like, okay, I'm going to feel one way or the other. I know this. So I went into it basically pure, and was immediately impressed by that first song, Los Angeles. But then the second song, The Steps, I was even more impressed by this one, especially the guitar work. And it had a very like kind of T-Rex or like Big Star guitar sound where it's like that very kind of distorted guitar. You can tell that they're using strictly the bridge pickups because it's all treble, not a lot of bass in their guitar, which is, for me, that's how I like to play. I like it to be kind of in your face. I like it to be loud, and I like it to have some attitude. And they certainly brought that on this song. And again, the drumming, I'm very impressed with Danielle's drumming. And I think it's tough when you see the credits because they basically all get credit for every instrument. So I'm sure they all add things on everything. So it's hard to really tell who pulled the main weight on any one part of the song. But I think, like I was saying, I think Danielle is the main drummer and was just very impressed throughout the whole thing with what she's able to do rhythm wise.
Yeah, no, she's great. And I love that they're kind of mashed up and you don't really know. I mean, credit where credit is due is a fine thing. But one of the cool things about HAIM is I think they're doing an all for one and one for all kind of outfit. So it doesn't matter. All credit goes to HAIM. It doesn't necessarily go to an individual. Unless it's something like to jump forward a couple songs, but it's not like a spoiler or anything like that. But the youngest sister's best friend died in a car accident. Mm-hmm. And I'm surprised more material about that didn't make it to the album. Not to be crass about it, but maybe she wasn't super into talking about it and was like, I can probably do it once. And that's about all that I'm able to muster. Yeah. I don't know how she felt about it.
Might just be respect for her friend as well. That
totally.
She wasn't sure she'd want to be all up in the album.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what the motivation was? I was definitely surprised there wasn't more of it, but then I thought about it and it's like, I think what makes them work is when they find common ground and it's the unit producing something. Mm-hmm. Not to make them sound like a weird hive mind, but it's when the unit is producing something, we're that much stronger. So it's not about individual accolades, which is kind of fucking nice. It's cool.
Yeah. And I think them being sisters, you always hear about like identical twins always have this connection where they just kind of know what the other's thinking. I think with how close it sounds like they always have been, that there's a little bit of that, that they understand what the others are trying to do. So it becomes a conglomerate rather than be, three separate forces coming together to try to figure something out like a lot of other bands are. I think they do have, because they have so many shared experiences and so many similar, things that they've gone through, that they're able to put all that together and they understand how the others think, so when they're writing a song, I think they know what sort of emotion the other one is trying to go for. So they know where to go with it, because everything I felt on the album lyrically, whatever the emotion they was going for, they were very good about matching that musically. And whether I really connected with the lyrics, that's a totally side point. It's the thing where credit is due. I understand what they were doing. And to somebody that's going to connect with, it's going to be incredible. It may not have connected with me, but that's not saying that they missed the mark. It just means that, they missed the mark emotionally with me. Maybe someday I'll go through something that I'll connect to that. But it's just, they really are very good about playing off each other and letting one take the lead. Like if one has a good song idea, they're like, okay, let's do that. And they all come together behind that and do it. And it's just a very cool, interesting dynamic that they bring to music.
Yeah, it is nice. Being a Frank Zappa fan, I'm used to a tyrant who was a genius and a polymath who ruled the roost. And if you didn't do things his way, you were fucking out. Mm-hmm. And it's a really refreshing antidote to that, to see three sisters who are like, nothing's more important than being sisters, but we're all pretty good at making music, so why don't we fucking give this a shot?
Yeah, and they really are. I mean, they're all good singers, all great musicians. I mean, it's to have that amount of musical talent in one family and then everybody to come together in a band to put it all together is, I don't know, maybe the Bee Gees. I don't know how many other bands ever really kind of captured that lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, I would say the Bee Gees. I like that. I'm pro BG.
Yeah, I mean, maybe AC/DC that I mentioned before with, Malcolm and Angus, the Van Halens, perhaps. I don't know a lot of other, I guess the Wilson sisters and Hart.
True.
Deserve some credit for that.
The Beach Boys, even though I think, at times they all wanted to throttle each other, but you could all be united in your hatred of Mike Love, fucking dork that he is.
Yeah, super dork. Yeah, that guy's the worst.
He sucks.
Yeah, Sully's the name. But to go back, I want to quickly touch on, the lyrics and the steps. One, I don't know who does the main vocals on these. That was always hard to figure out because they all harmonize so well. So they all get vocal credit on every song, so it's hard to see. And then they all get writing credit as well, so I have no way of knowing which one sang the songs. I don't know. Clearly have different ones saying at different points in the album, but verse 2 specifically, they're very good at being very forthright with what they're talking about, but still doing it in a way that feels like a little bit of an accomplishment when you figure it out. So verse 2, all the ivy is growing sideways. You won't stop it till it covers all of our place. And if you read the rest of the lyrics, it's about, they're kind of ignoring the problems that they have with each other. They're kind of putting them aside, sweeping them under the rug. But the ivy being the thing that's going to kind of cover is all those problems, all those issues that eventually it's going to become so prevalent that they won't be able to ignore it. So instead of addressing it, cutting it down, trimming it at the point that it's happening, they're just letting it grow and trying to enjoy themselves while they can, while knowing there's kind of a time limit on what's going on. And it was just presented in a way that I thought was, not so hit you over the head obvious like Taylor Swift tries to do. It was just subtle enough that, you were forced to think about it a little deeper and connect with it yourself, which I thought was really kind of cleverly done on this one.
Yeah, and it helps that musically it's couched in a very surf rock, Laurel Canyon, which you hear throughout this album. They're huge Joni Mitchell buffs. There's a million songs on here that I'm like, that could be a Joni Mitchell B-side, which is both a compliment and kind of a backhanded compliment, but we'll get into that. But they couch that whole message of the relationship that's run aground in this like very kind of upbeat surf rock anthem. And I think that's, again, the intelligence of it is just like, we're not going to make it this sad sap, why do you want to leave me? Self-flagellation Taylor Swift stuff. It's like, you're going to be kind of grooving along, and then you're going to catch something I said and be like, huh? It's a Born in the USA type thing sometimes.
Yeah. And so the next song is one we're not going to spend too much time on. It's called I Know Alone. Kind of clever the way they look at it is like when they wrote it, they said, I know alone better than anybody else does, where it's like everybody's got that moment where like nobody knows my sadness. It's nice that they kind of recognize that obviously other people know what sadness is, but they still wrote the song. And I didn't think this one was too lyrically deep or anything like that. Just like I said, one of those ones where I was like, it was okay, and just kind of moved on to the next one, which was Up From a Dream, which I thought was a very, very good song. I thought the way they did it, it was very kind of the same way that Courtney Barnett does things sometimes, where it sounds very simple what she's talking about. Like they mentioned, washing dishes. Walk into the kitchen, pull the dishes from the sink, and you have changed in the blink of an eye. And it's talking about like, it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be this big epiphany moment that someone has that totally changes their life. It's like those little moments, and then you realize all those little things you've been doing. And once you put those into perspective, now you've realized how much you've changed. It was kind of a nice little thing that they did with it, where it didn't feel like, again, like they were hitting me over the head with what they were trying to say. But with that line at the end of the chorus, it just kind of really gives you that perspective in that moment of like, oh yeah, I guess when you think about, if you work out every day, like working out that one time isn't going to do much for you, but do it for 5 months and you notice the difference. And then all of a sudden when you look back, you'd be like, wow, I've really changed. And I thought that was kind of the perspective they were going for on this one.
Well, and to that point, how many of us have had the experience where it's like, I had bottomed out and I was heading for the border with a samurai sword and 10 kilos of cocaine. And I knew that I wondered how I'd gotten to this point in my life. And that's when I found the Lord. Like, how many of us have had that experience? But how many of us have had one of those existential moments where it's like, to bring How I Met Your Mother back into the equation, rabbit or duck. It's a picture that, depending on the way you look at it, is a rabbit or it's a duck. And once you've seen the way you couldn't see before, it becomes hard to see it the old way. It's this paradigm shift. So this idea that you can't unsee something that completely shattered your illusions about what you had going on. But it also doesn't treat it like this massive, like you said, epiphany moment. I fell to my knees and realized how wrong I had been. It's these microscopic flashes of, like, literally and figuratively waking up for a dream. Roll out of bed, stumble in there. oh, I didn't clean any dishes for fucking breakfast this morning. I'd better start wiping them down. God, I'm so lazy. Why don't I ever just do these the night before? And now I'm going to be late for work. God, my life's a mess. And your anxiety starts spiking. You're like, I can't do this. I can't do this for another 35 years. Retire at 65, which our generation's not even going to be able to do. And you just spin the fuck out. So it's less of a like epiphany and more of a active panic attack where you're like, something's got to change.
Okay, and so the next song is 3 a.m. And this one is one that you had brought up as one that you really enjoyed. So why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
It's just a pure and simple 90s R&B jam about a booty call, and I loved it. It was totally different from anything else on the album, to the point where it started, I was like, did I accidentally add something to my queue that interrupted the HAIM album? It's great. For no other reason than it's just completely different from everything else they're doing, which again is very Joni Mitchell, which is fine, but your mileage may vary with Joni. And this is kind of a backhanded compliment, but I love Sarah Bareilles. All the sisters kind of sound like Sarah Bareilles, and there kind of comes a point, almost like Dua Lipa, where there aren't enough like interesting vocal gymnastics going on that it kind of hits this dense pocket where the voice just kind of becomes driving and there's not really a lot of subtlety and technique and vibrato and anything like that. Like just a little something on a song-to-song basis where you break it up. Even if you do a Lake Street Dive, like, you growl into a verse for me. Like, just a little more dynamism vocally would help. So a song like this completely breaks that up. It's so different that you kind of get out of the slump with like the songs are starting to run together a little bit. This was genius to be like, nope, shake it up.
Yeah, it was just about, a little late night rendezvous. And for people who aren't aware, the French word rendezvous translates directly to booty call. And it's just strictly about that, and it's kind of, saying, should I not answer the phone, questioning it a little bit. I think they end up answering the phone, going through with it again. But it's just that, I think it's that kind of thing where it's like, is this really good for me? Fuck it. I guess we'll see what happens. And I thought it was, like you said, a good kind of refreshing break from what they normally do.
And it's fun. And most of us can relate, So on that level, I was like, hell yeah, you guys did it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the next one called Don't Wanna, again, we're going to kind of skip through this one a little bit, but it was one of those ones where it really didn't grab me. This was one of those ones where we referenced in the beginning where we were like, not every song on here is a total knockout stunner. They're all okay, at least. This one was okay.
Yeah, it was one of the more okayer songs on the album, I would say. I don't really have anything else to say about it.
Yeah, moving right along. This one's going to be called Another Try. So this one, I marked down that I really liked it. It was kind of about a relationship in limbo, doesn't sound awful, just maybe wasn't a perfect fit. And the chorus sounded exactly like a UB40 song. I don't know if you got that same kind of thing from it. Had that little kind of reggae vibe to it.
I definitely got the reggae vibes. What specific UB40 song are you thinking of?
I think the I Can't Help Falling in Love with You cover they did.
That's a good one. That's a jam.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I love UB40. I mean, love them. And I just, in the chorus specifically, it just gave me that kind of really, that dance hall kind of backbeat kind of vibe to it. It was nice. It was a good little tune.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I like it because it's, again, the story of a relationship that was on again, off again for like about a decade. Because I read into some of the backstory for it. And again, I think it's another Danielle where she's like, I had this like really shitty, toxic on again, off again relationship. And I decided to write a song about like, at what point do you arrive at the conclusion that this isn't worth trying again? But no one's ever that rational. So it's about another try. And as she's writing this song, debating about like, I don't know, should we? She finds out the guy that it's about got engaged to another girl. So that those lines at the end where it's like, I hope you're happy now, or whatever the fuck she's saying, I forget off the top of my head. But like that takes on a whole new meaning in the context of this guy getting engaged to another woman after they like I think, reestablished the lines of communication. And then like 2 weeks later, she found out he was getting married.
Yeah. And I think, and I don't want to cast aspersions on anybody in HAIM here, as a person. We'll critique their music. I don't know enough about their personal lives to really say anything one way or the other, but I got to think there's a little bit of motivation putting this song on the album.
Just a bit.
Yeah, knowing like maybe the person that he proposed to didn't realize the history there. Maybe he wasn't honest about it. And if not, hearing it this way might just be enough to kind of break them up a little bit, drive enough of a wedge in there that they split off completely on their own. And I don't know. I don't want to say that was the motivation behind it, but it's hard not to think that there's at least a little bit of that in there, that there's some of that competitive nature in her. That's like, well, he might have given you the ring, but I'm about to put this song out, so we'll see how this goes.
Who will have the last laugh?
Yeah.
That's kind of the sense that I get. There's a little Taylor Swift poison pen letter element to it. Mm-hmm. Not as petty as she gets, but definitely you can now spin this song as sort of it was a goodbye to him because I guess he's just moved on. I can't say to bigger and better things. Maybe this girl's bigger than me. Probably, but definitely not better. Anyway, the album went platinum. I kind of get that sense.
Yeah, and I don't think she's not saying anything bad about the person that he got engaged to. That I don't think she's saying anything bad about the relationship that they have or anything. I think it's just more about hey, if that doesn't work out, your girl's still here.
Yep, girls got to eat.
Yeah. I think it's just kind of hey, I'm not saying one way or the other, just putting it out there. Just, try it on, see how it fits. But, if that doesn't work out, I'm over here waiting.
Just keep your options open.
Yeah. And that's questionable motives, I would say, but good song.
Yeah. It's sus, but I liked it.
Yeah. Next song, Leaning on You, is kind of a more optimistic relationship song, which is always nice to hear, but musically was fine. Harmonies were fine. Lyrically,
not much to talk about here. We can probably just boot, scoot, and boogie to the next one.
Yeah. So the next one is I've Been Down. And I think we both mentioned that this one was kind of a favorite on the album here, at least on my end. This one was that you wanted to talk about. So I don't think you mentioned whether it was favorite or not, but certainly something that you had something to say about.
So let me turn it back on you for 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Joni Mitchell, for or against?
Against.
Against.
Yes.
As a matter
Hard against.
Of policy. Hard against.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to know where we all stand on Joni Mitchell. I was hard anti-Joni Mitchell to start.
Mm-hmm.
I got more into certain aspects of her output, but I wouldn't say I would allow myself to be burned at the stake alive for Joni Mitchell's honor.
Yeah.
I try to prevent her from getting hit by a bus, but too much cardio, I'm not going to put myself out there for her.
Yeah.
So I've come to appreciate Joni Mitchell. I really have. The stuff that I really like. But a couple times on this album, HAIM goes a little too far down the Joni Mitchell hole. And I liked this song a lot, but it is the most Joni Mitchell song on the entire album. To the point where, again, it would not shock me to be we dug up some unrecorded, there's some demo that this sculptor had out in Reseda, and he traded it to us for $25 and some oatmeal cookies, and we decided to make this a song.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting that I enjoyed it that much, and I really don't enjoy Joni Mitchell at all. I think the first time I heard her was on The Last Waltz when she did, I think the song was Coyote, I think is the name of it.
Yep.
Didn't like that at all. And then I was like, okay, well, let me listen to some of her other stuff. I think my dad had told me that, I shouldn't judge her just on that stuff. So I listened to some other stuff and I'm like, it's just not for me. I guess when I say hard against, I don't put her on the same level as U2 or Taylor Swift, or bands that I will actively campaign against, but I will never go out of my way to listen to Joni Mitchell. Just not for me. This one gave me much more of, and I mentioned before, much more of a Courtney Barnett vibe to it. The way that it was kind of the stream of consciousness, the way that it was just still kind of a rock song, with a little bit of attitude to it. It gave me much more of the sense of Courtney Barnett than it did Joni Mitchell. I guess I'm never going to look for Joni Mitchell references or influences in songs just because I don't like her that much. So I probably wouldn't listen for that stuff. But it did give me very much like that Courtney Barnett kind of vibe to it, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, and it's one of the more like honest and vulnerable songs lyrically, and not in a like cloying, self-pitying way. It's very just like, hey, my state of mind is extremely anxious right now. I'm kind of all over the place. You got to bear with me. And it's about a person that's like, yeah, I can do that on your terms. You tell me how you need this to go, and I'm only ever going to support you. And nothing about it is like sticky, sweet, and cloying. It's very, and like no one should be ashamed to have anxiety, but there's kind of a tone of like, I know that this is inconvenient, especially when we're trying to start a relationship, but it is what it is. I am who I am. I can't help it. And that other person goes, and I don't hold that against you. I just want to help you out because I care about you and I'm here. And it's very straightforward. It's not too prosaic and flowery. I don't know. This was a hit for me. I really enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah, this was a good one. And I will say just the way, when I talk about Courtney Barnett specifically, the second half of verse 2 when it really struck me, and I've been watching too much TV, looking up at the ceiling. It's been making me feel creepy. I'm just trying to shake this feeling. It had that very, those lyrics where it's like none of the words are complicated. She didn't bust out a thesaurus for any of this stuff, but the way she structured it, the way everything rhymed all the way through was very much gave me that Courtney Barnett feeling. And if you listen to that episode, you'll know that I really enjoyed that album that we reviewed by Courtney Barnett. So when I compare this song to that, it is a big endorsement from me to go and listen to this one. I really liked it.
Yeah, definitely. I feel the same way about the song and Courtney Barnett.
Yes.
Your honor.
Yes. Courtney Barnett, little spoiler, may even make it onto my best of 2020. Yes, or at least favorite things that I listened to in 2020, because that album was a little bit older. Yes, very good. The next song was one that we both mentioned, and I think this one, as far as just enjoyable to listen to and kind of has the punchlines and everything, this is probably the best one they've got on here, and it's called Man from the Magazine. And it's really about, like you mentioned before, women have a very different experience when they're making music, when they're listening to music. They have a very different experience than we do, very different perspective. And when they have a couple things in this song where it really hits home, specifically in verse 2 when she says, "Man from the music shop, I drove too far for you to hand me that starter guitar." And it's that kind of questioning that women always get, of like, well, are you really this good? If women say they like sports, guys are always like, well, to name 5 teams, ask them to prove themselves as a musician or as a sports fan. It's kind of a bullshit thing that happens because I've never been asked those questions in my life. Whenever I do this stuff, everybody always assumes I'm not that great at guitar. Everybody always assumes that I'm very good at it because I own one and I'm a man. And it's like, well, I benefit from that. I can certainly see where HAIM would be very pissed off that that's the case. They don't get the same benefit of the doubt.
And that's exactly like we were talking at the top about perspective and this idea that, like, I think maybe because they're vulnerable people and because they've had these experiences as women in music, they're kind of trying to insulate themselves, not from criticism like they can't take it, but like, you deal with gross men all the time. Do you now really need to hear what they think about your music? But this is like coming from the place of 2 people that are rooting for them and enjoy them and enjoy their music despite like some critical things that could be said just because that's the point of the fucking podcast.
Yeah.
But like, I love hearing this perspective, and it's really interesting. So the Man from the Magazine, apparently that's because Estee, the middle girl, like makes these insane stank faces when she's playing bass, which I fucking love. Shout out to brother of the pod, Axel, who's a tremendous bass player.
Yeah.
He is the king of the stank face into the like Roxbury head bob. He gets his foot up on the amp, gives you a little like peek of the shadow with a bulge. Like, he's got it going on. So apparently Estee does the same thing. She's got the bass going and she's just like full on stank face, super into it. And that's fucking cool as shit. And it should just be left at that. But some obnoxious reporter is like, "Oh, do you make those same faces in bed?" And she was like, knowing knowing the person I am now, I would have said, go fuck yourself. But at the time, I did what most women are programmed to do and just kind of play it off like it was funny and go, well, there's only one way for you to find out, wink. And he laughed and I laughed and we moved on with our lives. But it's like, she just had to swallow that. And it's just another experience along the way. But then it becomes this song, which, again, for me, I don't know what the fucking female perspective is or the female experience. You tell me. And that's what they do in this song. And I appreciate that kind of shit.
Yeah. And I've always said, and I think Axl might have been the one to say this to me, if you're not making faces, if the bass player is not making faces, then the bass ain't funky enough. And that's something that's always stuck with me, that if you're watching a concert and the bass player is just sitting there stone faced, that means the music's probably not upbeat. It probably doesn't have a great groove to it. If he's able to just stand there with no expression, no movement, and just play along to the songs. I mean, you even watch bluegrass bands play, and when the guy's playing a stand-up bass, they're usually bopping around. They're usually dancing around. I mean, it's hard to really get into the music if you don't see the musicians also enjoying it. So if I was at a HAIM concert and I saw her like make all the faces, like, let me know that you're having as good a time as I am, because it's almost as if, it's hard for me to enjoy things if I don't think the person making the stuff is also enjoying it. It makes you feel a little bit dirty because you feel like they're forced to be there. They have to be there. They don't like being there, but you're there and they're there because of you, because you've bought a ticket for this show. So now they have to play this show. I don't like that. So if they want to make all the faces, they want to dance around, they want to groove around, I am all for that, because if they're having a good time, much more likely that I'm going to be having a good time.
It truly, I gotta say, when I was in Laser Dad with Axl as the bass player and friend of the pod Tanner as the drummer, they're both the short happy boys in the rhythm section. So you look at either of them during a show and they're both just back there bouncing up and down, having the time of their lives, drinking a couple beers, keeping it all together. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Just great. Axl, if you're out there, I hope you're still having as much fun as you were back then. All right. So that kind of wraps it up as far as the songs that we really wanted to dive into. The next two are All That Ever Mattered. This one kind of gave me a very later Prince vibe to it. Just the way that the lyrics were structured, even musically, kind of gave me that sense as well. And I think they really wear their influences on their sleeves. Whether that was influenced by Prince, I don't know. But throughout the whole album, constantly was hearing like Courtney Barnett. I don't know if they really listened to her, but that style of music I heard in there, and it's all good. It's not that they're trying to really rip it off or send it up too much or anything like that. It's like, you can tell that they've absorbed that style of music before, and now it's gone through the filter of them, and now here it is on the album. And I thought throughout the whole thing, there was different snippets of that. Like I mentioned, very like T-Rex vibe or Big Star vibe with the guitar that they had. It's just very much enjoyable all the way through to listen to without ever making me feel like I wasn't listening to HAIM.
But overall, it's weird. I want to say stream it, but it's not a super enthusiastic recommendation, but it's also not like a kind of mealy mouthed endorsement either. I just again, I came in directly in the middle where I'm like, what hit, what didn't was just kind of there. It was filling a silence. I know that sounds dick, but it's the way I felt. So I don't know. I guess if we did a good enough job of compelling you to listen to it, go for it. And if you listen to this and you were like, it doesn't sound worth it, I guess don't.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty much 50-50.
Yep.
On the album, as far as the number of songs that really hit for me versus the ones that didn't. It was very much, I think the ones that really hit for me did enough that it overshadowed the ones that it didn't. So I'm going to say personally, for me, stream it, because I think there's enough here that people are going to enjoy. But again, like you said, if there's some stuff that you don't enjoy on here, I'm not going to get on my soapbox and tell you why you're wrong about it. I just hope that you enjoy the whole album, because they are very good musicians, do have the capability of writing some very, very good songs as they've done on this album. But I think they just get a little too involved with trying to make, music that sounds too much like some stuff that other people are doing. Like you said, getting a little too Swifty, where they kind of get an idea in their head and then they don't really critically think about it and think about whether it's something they should really follow through with. I think because they have so much success with other songs, it's hard for them to talk themselves out of doing those other songs if they aren't as good. But I mean, I don't know. It's the thing where it's like, do we really want to have them totally change the way they approach things and maybe lose the ability to have the songs that we liked on there? Maybe they just go way too far and do things the wrong way. I think they should just keep doing what they're doing. I think they made enough here that I really liked that if the next album is the same way, I'll probably enjoy listening to it just as much and pull the same amount of songs that I liked out of it. It's just like you said, it's hard to say one way or the other. I'm going to say stream it, but if you don't, I'm not going to beat you up about it. That's
fair. And I would offer a brief caveat, which is when I say 50-50, it's not like, that's like a failing grade in school. But the important thing to remember is the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So even there was nothing objectively bad on this album, not even by a long shot. It's just stuff that was like not that interesting to me. So by saying it's 50-50, it's not even a condemnation of the album itself. It's just where it all shook out for me. Sometimes I love every single song on an album we review. Sometimes it's a little more difficult, and this was just one of those times.
Yeah. And that is a fully honest review that you get here on Out on That Line. You want to hear two men be more confused about anything? I don't know if you could compared to how we just were about this album. But if you listen to it, I think you'll see what we mean. Hopefully you like everything on it, because I want you to enjoy the music. I want you guys to listen to these albums and really dig into them and like them, because the point of this is to just broaden our perspectives, also broaden yours. Bring some stuff that you haven't listened to before. If you haven't heard of HAIM or really listened to them a lot like I hadn't, I've found a band that I enjoy now. I found one that I'm going to probably look at their older albums, see if there's other stuff that I really liked. Because there was enough on here that I think they really do have something. I just want something better next time that they make one.
And again, to bring it full circle with Taylor Swift, totally fair to expect that.
Yep.
So
yeah. Well, I mean, I think that about does it. I think we're just over the hour mark here. We're at about an hour and 9 minutes. So is there anything left that you wanted to plug or talk about?
Just a reminder that I realize the release schedule makes this kind of a trip for biscuits, I guess. But when you're hearing this, I'll put stuff out on social media too. But we want to hear some of your best and worst of 2020 in music. Talk about albums that you really loved in 2020. Talk about a song you hated or a musical moment that you hated. You can talk about your most beloved artist. You could talk about the worst episode of this podcast. We could take it. We just want to hear your best and the worst of the music world in 2020.
Yes. And also something I want to plug that I didn't think you were going to, a little podcast called Skimbo Lounge. That if you're listening to this one on a Monday, I believe the 100th episode of the Skimbo Lounge is going to be coming out that following Wednesday. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. 2 days later. Yeah.
Yes. So if you've been following along on the Skimbo Lounge journey, this is going to be the one where Rory finally just hangs himself live on the podcast. So you don't want to miss it.
It's going to be totally fucking awesome. I told him I'm going to do it too. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to keep the Skimbo Lounge IP. I'm going to replace him with a girl. It's 2021 is going to be all gravy. But before we get there, we got to get through episode 100. And what a journey it's been, Geoff. I can't wait. I hope the listeners will join us on the Skimbo Lounge.
Oh, it's gonna be great. I'm excited for it. So make sure you follow us Out on That Line on all our socials. We also have that Facebook page now. Gotten some good response on that. So I think it's another good way for us to kind of get the message out to you folks. Starting next year, you're going to be looking for some new versions of content from us as well. So make sure you follow us on Instagram Out on That Line, Twitter Out on That Line 1. You'll find us at Out on That Line Podcast, the page on Facebook. Email us outonthatline@gmail.com. But if you follow all those, pay attention. You're going to see us start to roll out that new content. You're going to see what we're really excited to get started doing. And hopefully that you're going to like it as well.
I think that's it for me.
Yeah, that's it for me. Till next time.